Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion today regarding security and compliance challenges in health tech. We have a fantastic group of speakers today, but before introducing them, please remember to mute microphones. We value your opinion. Please leave your comments in the general Slack space to discuss the topic further. My name is Balint Bene, CEO of Bene Studio, and I will be the moderator today. My company does HealthTech mobile and web application development and design, where data security and compliance are key requirements. Our panelists today are Larry Trotter, founder of Inherent Security from the US, Jovan Stevovic, CEO at Chino.io from Germany, and Alexander Roussanov, partner at Arnold Porter from the UK. And now I will ask the panelists to introduce themselves in one minute. Who are you and how are you connecting to HealthTech security and compliance? First, Larry, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Nice to meet everybody once again. So my name is Larry Trotter. I'm the founder of Inherent Security, and we specialize in cybersecurity compliance, pretty much with healthcare organizations, helping them out with HIPAA security and privacy requirements. So what we usually do is build cybersecurity programs from ground up. Nothing's existing within the organization. So we develop the policies, conduct a risk assessment, and assist their engineering team with implementing the technical security controls. Now, for some of our clients that already have cybersecurity programs in place, we'll assess it to identify the gaps that they might have in terms of HIPAA and provide some recommendations so they can close those gaps and have a more mature program. And everybody, I'm sure, on this call understands that security can be expensive, especially for startups. So a lot of companies will leverage us as well as their virtual chief information security officer to be the liaison between their business partners and their business, and also to work with the executives of their business and the engineering team to ensure that the governance program and compliance is all being met.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. And Alexander, could you introduce yourself and your connection with the security and compliance field in health tech?
Sure, thank you. My name is Alexander Roussanov, and I'm a partner in the Brussels office of Arnold Porter. We advise clients on anything relating to regulatory, meaning CE marking of health tech classification as a medical device, especially under the new MDR rules, and also anything to do with cybersecurity and data protection, GDPR compliance, complying with the new requirements of the EDPB and the Schrems II ruling, and more recently, responding to customer requests where customers question why data is sent to the US, being completely neurotic about it and trying to reassure our clients' customers that US is not such an evil place and NSA have better things to do than check each and every byte crossing the border.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. And Jovan, who are you and how are you connecting to health tech security and compliance?
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Jovan Stevovic, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Chino.io. Chino.io is an Italian company with presence also in Germany, actually now fully remote after COVID. We are 7 years on the market, helping companies, digital health companies, startups, SMEs, and larger companies to build innovative products by making sure they comply with regulations and they are secure. So we combine regulatory knowledge, expertise on GDPR, mostly, but also HIPAA and specific regulations like in Germany, DVG. And we combine also the regulation with the technology, a development platform that developers can use to secure the data, implement specific requirements, and ship their products faster to the market. So yeah, looking forward to share more.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Jovan. And we can see that we are having a really expert panel today, focusing on data security and compliance. And our main question during this discussion is that from your perspective, what are the most important compliance aspects to consider as a health tech startup or enterprise manager? And I would like to ask Larry, connecting to this question, what you should take care of if you would like to enter into the US health tech market?
Sure. So, first and foremost, where I find a lot of problems is understanding what type of data you have, because everything revolves around the data and the different types of data that you have. Often I've found that organizations don't understand how they process data, where data is stored, how data is transmitted, what third parties they work with. Understanding that information helps out a lot, because when it comes to HIPAA or any other type of compliance, you want to really narrow the scope. Once you have your data in 50 different places when it could be two, the scope is wider, things can start to get more complex, that sort of thing. And also, a lot of times organizations don't realize that they don't need all the different types of metadata that they're receiving if they're working with a business partner or they're receiving the data from from the customers, that sort of thing. So what we call de-identifying data, only keeping the necessary parts that are required, can as well help you reduce the scope too. So when you have a very a better understanding of that, you can reduce the scope of what you have to protect, and it also helps you identify what type of security controls you have to put in place to protect that data.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. And Jovan, what's your clients' experiences regarding the US market?
We are assisting several customers either coming from US market to Europe or from Europe to US. So there is a definitely the need for our customers to understand the requirements, and I totally agree with Larry. Map the same kind of concept of in questions of what data I'm processing, for which purposes I'm processing, do I really need this data, and adapting the differences between European and US regulations, because there are differences in interpreting what is health data, what requirements you need to solve based on the business model, B2B, B2C, and understanding all those differences when it comes from Europe to US and vice versa. That's one of the main challenges our customers have.
Can you mention an example for an exact challenge which came up in your practice entering the US?
Entering the US, well, HIPAA compliance for digital health companies is the main goal. They need to be HIPAA compliant, especially if they want to work in the B2B space. But now there are, for example, also B2C regulations like CCPA in California and other states popping up. So the main challenge from a European company is first understanding this configuration of different laws, and then planning, how to be compliant with one or more depending on their needs. So the first challenge is learning about the different regulation differences. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Alexander, what's your clients' experiences entering US?
Well, I'm mainly advising the US clients entering the EU, but what I'm seeing more and more is companies operating both markets and need to ensure compliance in the same time with the US rules and the EU rules, and US rules and GDPR are somewhat different. But now we see other countries like China adopting GDPR-like legislation with a bit of a communist flavor and political party control. But what is important is to make sure that, I think the first step is to make sure that companies know what their data flows are, where data is going, so they can inform their users and customers what is happening to their data, ensure that they comply with all the applicable requirements for transfers. One thing that's pretty challenging is when they use vendors. Vendors are not always straightforward what they do with the data, especially cloud providers. Cloud providers try to be cute and talk about data at rest. We're saying data at rest states in Europe, and then we ask, okay, where is the data going when it runs? So then they become invasive, and you end up finding out that they use data centers all over the place. Data is transiting through all over the place, and they keep saying, well, but it was only for seconds in China, so you don't need to comply with GDPR. Well, that's wrong. I mean, any access of data from another country constitutes transfer. So, and the EU authorities are very strict. People in Europe are getting neurotic about their data going elsewhere. So knowing your data flows, knowing your security measures, your legal mechanisms to justify the transfers, this is crucial, because a complaint will come. It's not the question when it's not if, it's when. There are way too many people with too much time on their hands and just waiting to complain about something.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. And Larry, what can you add to this, as you are the most expert in the US from this panel?
Yeah, I think that, both of them hit it directly on the head there, especially when it comes, Jovan talked about, also understanding what other type of regulations will be involved. You have CCPA, California Protection Act, and each in the US, it's pretty much, if the state law is more stringent than the federal law, then you have to abide by the state law. And of course, privacy is becoming this big thing now. So the data that the healthcare data that you have, falls under that as well. So understanding the different types of law in the U.S., definitely can make more things complex. So to have a grasp of that is great. And also Alexander was talking about third party and hosting, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, a little bit later, but is something really big right now, is third-party risk assessments. No matter if it's a hosting provider or a potential business partner, them wanting to understand what your security posture looks like as an organization, and actually requesting evidence as well to verify that.
And what can you see as a really special US component or US mindset within the compliance and security?
So as far as a mindset is, I think, what was it this year, the biggest breach we heard, if it wasn't Microsoft, it was SolarWinds, and it keeps boiling down to third parties doing business with government, or third parties, any of your business partners doing business with you and not performing a thorough risk assessment, and it ends up affecting the whole supply chain. So that's really huge right now. Again, third parties are looking for some type of validation, providing risk questionnaires, and they're also requiring a lot of businesses to have some type of audit, formal audit, so they can see reports and have a thorough understanding of their security posture as well.
Mm-hmm. And what does it mean for a startup, for example, if you would like to enter in the US and we are working with a lot of third-party components, then what to do with this situation?
I'm going to say you can't fake it anymore. It's getting to that point when you have a SOC 2 audit, or your business partner wants you to be ISO 27001 certified. You really have to have your ducks in a row and have and actually what I call operationalizing security, not just be policy and procedure driven. As important as it is, you have to operationalize this and be able to prove that. So I would advise startups, do it the right way first. You're not going to avoid it. You might for your first one or two business partners opportunities, but I've seen it. I worked with a lot of startups, and from the MVP stage is still with business partners. They want them to have some type of formal audit in place. So really get a grasp of it. And at this point, you might even want to have somebody, a chief security officer on your board, or someone who really understands security on your team, to make sure that you implement and meet regulations correctly.
Mm-hmm. And how serious should we take the other part of the security, the cyber security, because it's clear that that compliance is needed, but on the other hand, how dangerous for us as a startup that kind of cybersecurity threats, which we can read in the news with big companies and big enterprises, but maybe we are just a startup and and we don't have to care with that.
So, cybersecurity, people talk about cybersecurity and compliance, and actually, my company, Inherent Security, we're a cybersecurity first company, because once you do cybersecurity, you pretty much, we build all of our programs off of frameworks. And when you follow that strategy, you include compliance within building your cybersecurity program. So I would say companies should always, even startups, no matter what size of the company is, to be cybersecurity first and have a robust program in place first. When it comes to compliance, it's good, but when you look at security from a compliance perspective, you don't always include everything, because the regulators want a certain amount of cybersecurity implemented in your program, but they don't necessarily look at the whole picture because they're not the experts. And a lot of times they work with industry and the government to understand what a real cyber, to have the necessary cybersecurity controls in place, what that actually looks like. So my suggestion would be to, think cybersecurity first. And startups have the biggest advantage because once you bake it in from building the company to the ground up, it's a lot easier to mature the program rather than being a Fortune 500 company with everything already in place. And now you're deciding you want to do cybersecurity and you have to restructure your processes, your resources and your IT systems. It's just a bigger overhaul.
Yeah, it's a really important point, actually, what you highlighted, and it sounds a reasonable strategy, because first we always just think about the paperwork, the compliance itself, but the reason behind is to be a safe service and a safe company for our partners. So it sounds a really good strategy, starting with the cybersecurity, the real meaning of this whole assessment and this whole process. And what's your experience with that, Jovan? How can you see the cybersecurity aspect?
Well, it's definitely fundamental is the core to ensure compliance, as Larry totally agree on. As Larry said, totally agree on that. Cybersecurity is fundamental. What we see in Europe is that companies, when they start building products, so especially startups or SMEs where they build a new product, typically we're talking about data intense products, collecting health sensitive data. So they need to figure out how they're collecting this data. Do they have the legal rights to collect this data? This is one of the first things that companies need to do. And then the next question is, okay, what is the minimum set of requirements they need to do? Because they want to ship a product in a few months, typically for yesterday. Their plan was, always they are always late. So what is the minimum set of requirements, minimum things they need to do in order to develop the version 1 of the app? So this is and then embedding, okay, everything in the future releases and improving. But what is the minimum set of requirements they need to satisfy in order to deliver? And typically this minimum set is defined not only by GDPR, but also by customers. Especially in B2B space, we see many companies, startups failing the first tests when the big companies like the pharmas or the hospitals out there do a third-party risk assessment on them. So it's connected to the discussion we had before. So a company not only needs to do third-party risk assessments on their own components and partners, they are going to be subject to thorough risk assessment by third parties and by customers. And we have seen specific companies who do that on behalf of a pharma, that they are super tough. So now it's becoming tougher and tougher, and I would say in an exponential scale to pass those tests, because pharma, for example, realize that they cannot do any more that job by themselves. So they're hiring specialists to do assessments on startups. And I see a tough job here to pass those tests. So we see, we are helping them and trying to put everything together for this version, the debut in the society, and delivering the version 1 of the application. That's somehow, the main
Yeah,
challenge.
it's really interesting what you mentioned, that similarly to building up the minimum viable product concept for the market entry from a software product perspective, we should define a minimum viable a compliance package as well for ourselves with a roadmap for further development, and take care of that aspect as well.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because in most cases the companies are really focusing on the core features, on the business, how to do the business with the new software or with the startup, but they don't really care about the non-visible aspects of a business or a product. But as you highlighted, it's better having a plan for the minimum compliance setup, and in that case we can be safe.
Yeah, if I can add here, so typically we see that digital health companies nowadays, they know that they are in super regulated space, but for example they have difficulties in understanding from when they start, especially first products, first startups and so on. When they start, they have difficulties understanding what is the difference between MDR, so medical regulations, or FDA in US counterpart, and GDPR and HIPAA US counterparts. So the private security versus medical. And then when they understand the differences, understanding that GDPR and HIPAA are combining legal and tech, and it's part of our roadmap, as you said, it needs to be part of our roadmap to define a minimum viable regulatory compliance product. So it takes lots of skills and lots of resources that typically they don't budget, for example. So it's a challenging process.
And how you would define the difference between the two set of definitions, as you mentioned that people sometimes confuse them?
Well, digital health and medtech is highly regulated from two different aspects. One is the quality and safety of products, so MDR and FDA, so providing quality management systems and certifications that your product is not going to damage people from the health point of view. And the other is GDPR and HIPAA, very specific regulations, especially HIPAA from technical side, GDPR more from conceptual side, on how you manage the data and how you ensure compliance. So on this side, the danger is to get a fine or to not deliver, mostly for startups, is not being able to deliver your product because you're going to fail those tests. And we have seen, for example, in Germany, especially in the last couple of years, quite big scandals, bad PR for startups. One was almost a unicorn here in Berlin, that some researchers discovered that they were not managing consent properly, and they were transferring the data from users in non-authorized way to social networks because they were using social login features. So very simple things, very simple errors where startups failed, and they, from a unicorn, they went to a much lower ranking, let's say, in few days. Yeah, so yeah, those kind of problems are, those kind of regulations.
Yeah, thanks for defining the differences. And Alexander, what's your thought on that two sets of regulations?
Well, first of all, that cybersecurity is not another bit of compliance. It's the articles of the GDPR clearly require that as part of GDPR compliance, companies maintain cybersecurity, which is proportional to the risks. And if we're talking about patients' health data, or let's say it's a wearable or an app that collects all the time data about the health of the individual, this is sensitive data that needs to be protected at all times, means it needs to be encrypted. The transfer channels need to be protected. There should be pseudonymization. So it is, on one hand, part of the GDPR compliance. On the other side, like Jovan just said correctly, with the MDR, any software or medical device that is CE marked, in order to get the CE marking, the company would need to demonstrate how the data is kept secure. So cybersecurity plays here as well. So I mean, it seems to be the different thing, but cybersecurity, like Larry said, needs to be baked in from the start. The non-compliance is different. The consequences, GDPR, we all know about the huge fines that a company can get. From the MDR perspective, if it is found that security of the data is not maintained, this means that the notified body may refuse to deliver certificate of conformity, meaning that the product will never make it to the market. Or if it's found that afterwards the device does not comply with what is expected as security, the competent authorities in the EU member states may intervene and basically require that the product is no longer placed on the market, which could be at the end of the startup, because if they need to withdraw the product from the market, investors may leave and revenue will stop. So cybersecurity is not just an afterthought. It's without cybersecurity, there can be no GDPR compliance, but also no MDR compliance either, or IVDR compliance when the new regulation on in vitro diagnostics comes in next year.
Thanks, Alexander. And after we discovered a bit the startup point of view on this compliance topic, what we should take care of if we are an enterprise manager who would like to work with different vendors, including startups. And Jovan, would you mind to start with your point?
Well, it is a matter of responsibility. So everybody in the chain, so whoever is the first offering a service to citizens or patients, needs to take care of all the data processing and all providers in that chain of responsibility and data transfers and data processing and so on and so forth. So everybody in this chain needs to make sure that who's behind it's compliant and that the processing is secure and safe, because the one upfront will pay the fine and then will, in the worst case scenario, sue the others who are guilty for making errors. So, but the one upfront is the one responsible. This is, as I said also before, it's a clear trend that this is getting more and more serious, because we have seen small errors bringing big damage. So, and the bigger the company, the bigger the damage will be in terms of reputation and fine, but not necessarily that much the fine as reputation damage. So we see that big companies are super scared about that. So yeah, I think the main challenge nowadays is not making errors in this data processing. And it's really complicated because, for example, regulations like GDPR, cybersecurity is the core thing. I totally agree on that. It's but then you can make so many other errors that are not related to specifically technical cybersecurity things. So a lot of training needs to be done in this space to make sure that that the community learns more about what is compliance and how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. So we as a enterprise manager, we have to really keep an eye on these even small errors, because it can cause big problems, and we should attend to different trainings and if we can work with specialists to discover these hidden dangers.
Yeah, at the end, we are nowadays with digital health, we are talking data native applications, businesses relying on data to do business. So if we don't learn the basics about compliance and how to make this data an asset and not a risk, it's going to be a challenge in the future, because we will see more and more regulations. With GDPR, we thought that we will have just one regulation that solves everything, makes everything clear in Europe and single market, and that's it. Actually, we are seeing that the new regulations are popping up, and specific requirements, for example, like DVG in Germany. If you want your app to be reimbursed, you need to go through a specific assessments that are stricter than GDPR, more precise, 140 something requirements. So the landscape is getting more and more complicated.
Yeah, then we really should be careful with our steps. And Alexander, what can you add to this? What to take care of as a manager from the enterprise side?
Basically, GDPR and cybersecurity compliance by design from the get-go. When a product is designed, just already to think how it could comply with the regulatory requirements, both GDPR and MDR, because it's very nice to have a good product which is exciting and revolutionary, but if it cannot by design comply with the regulatory requirements, it's a no-go. And this is not hypothetical. We had a client who had a great device, just it would never been accepted by the EU authorities the way the law is right now and the way they're seeing the US.
Wow.
Because let's be honest, sending clear, non-pseudonymized or non-encrypted data to the US collected from telecommunication devices, which is straight in the crosshairs of FISA, won't fly. It's just not going to work. And if you ask many authorities in the EU right now, they're thinking about very strict rules, basically saying no transfers outside the EU to the US, period, until the US agrees to a new transfer mechanism. For me, pardon the expression, these are pipe dreams, because if you look why Safe Harbor and Privacy Shield were declared invalid, is basically the same reason. It's the way the US law is set up. I'm not saying it's bad, but I hardly see the US changing fundamentally their laws just to please the EU. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's not realistic to expect it. So whatever product a company is designing, if it involves transfers outside the EU, security, GDPR compliance, MDR compliance need to be taken care of from the get-go. Otherwise, it's potentially sabotaging the product in the future.
Oh yeah, thanks, Alexander, for these highlights. And Larry, what can you see from a manager perspective if an enterprise would like to work together with different startup vendors? What to take care of? What can you add to the others' points?
Yeah, they made some very good points, and again, it goes back to doing that risk assessment of the startup that you want to do business with to see if they have the necessary or a reasonable amounts of security controls in place. And I do want to touch on an aspect when we're talking about HIPAA that's often overlooked is the privacy aspect of that as well. There have been plenty of cases in the U.S. where the Office of Civil Rights, which is the government, a part of the Health and Human Services, OCR actually comes and does the audits, whether somebody complains there's a breach that's been made publicly or a company notifies OCR of a breach. So OCR has done investigations, and people complain all the time about the privacy aspect. That's verbal communication. If I'm able to see someone's health information and I communicate that on the news, that's actually was a case and stuff like that. There are fines for that. So having the privacy requirements as a part of that risk assessment is essential as well. And breach notification, if it's up to 500 records and under 500 records, there's a certain amount of allotted time that you have to report that to me as an enterprise, as your business partner, and also to the affected individuals and OCR as well. So you want to make sure that that company or the startup has a thorough understanding of that and has processes in place to manage security, privacy, and breach notification.
Yeah. Thanks, Larry. And now we reached our time frame for the closing topic. What is your one most important practical advice to startup leaders or enterprise managers in terms of compliance? And with this closing round, we will close this discussion as well. But after this panel, I encourage everyone to connect to these speakers and to discuss further, because it's a really really deep and really important topic. So Alexander, would you start? What is your one most important practical advice to either a startup or an enterprise leader?
Oh, work with an expert who knows not only the law in theory, but what is expected in practice, or talk to your peers who went through this difficult walk of pushing the product to the market, and think from, like I said, from the beginning, how you comply with regulatory requirements. I know business see these as impediment to business. This may be true, but the laws are the laws, need to be followed. And the authorities in the EU at least are getting more and more stringent, and there is more spotlight at new products. And ironically, it's because of what the big guys are doing, like Apple, Facebook, and Google. But this also reflects on startups, how they treat data.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander, for your advice. And Jovan, what would be your one most important practical advice?
Well, to take your time to explore out there what are the tools and what are the people that can get you, that can give you free advice, because there are plenty of people that will be happy to help. Nobody's going to say no if you ask for an advice. That's, you know, one of the rules for entrepreneurship out there. There are so many people happy to help. So take some time to explore what are the best tools or solutions available that can give you much smarter start to build your product and business. Once you've done it once, then the second will be much easier. But that's, you know, the classical startup entrepreneur's life.
Thanks, Jovan. And Larry, what's your one most important practical advice?
My one important practical advice would be to, again, bake security in from the idea stage. Understand that it's going to be required. There's not going to be a way of getting around it, and it's going to be a lot easier from the beginning stages. And if you're developing an IoT device, I would say to make sure that that device has security capabilities built in to be interoperable with the existing systems in your target IT infrastructure, because I've seen instances of that as well, where IoT devices are built, but they don't work well with the existing IT infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Thanks, Jovan. Thanks, Alexander, for the wonderful time together today. And I believe that we learned a lot about the compliance and security. And we should start with the research, with the expert consultation. We should take care of the security as a whole, not just the government compliance aspect of it. So it's a quite wide and big topic, but we must deal with it if we would like to be successful, either as a startup or as a enterprise in the health tech world. So it was a really beneficial discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you for hosting this.
Thank you.
And let's join us next month as well on October 28th. And also, please don't forget to place your written introductions and asks in the I'm Looking For channel in Slack to continue the conversation. For more Health Tech Networking Club news, please follow Bene Studio on social media. And in October, the panel discussion will be about female technology. It will be an equally important and exciting topic. So see you everybody in October, and thank you very much participating to this great networking club event today.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.